We can leave this in. I hit a button on my phone that moved me away. I'm still here, right?
Yeah, you're still here.
All right, we'll leave this in just so that the viewers know that you and I have tried to make a vid, not just this specific video, which has failed about 3 times. We've tried to make about 2 or 3 other videos in the past 2 months that have all failed.
I like to
So
think that it's God trying to keep me away from the fame I deserved. Just
really, I like to think it's God telling me this is the worst decision. I'm doing everything I can to make it
I'm
not
not destined to be on YouTube. I'm destined to be Jacob from Twitter. Just
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by Jacob from Twitter, good friend. I like talking movies with him, specifically, I guess, the late 90s kind of slasher craze. Today, we're talking about a film. I'm only laughing because I've said this so many times on failed recordings. Okay, today, we're talking about a film guaranteed to jack you up.
at this point you've said that more than the movie.
I have now. I really have.
To be fair, it's a great fucking line.
It's a
It's a
great line.
great
It needs to be represented here at the beginning, where the fans of the faculty who maybe don't even know who I am can go, "Yep, they're true believers. I got it. I'm in the
they're
right
true
place."
faculty fans.
Yep. Oh my God, it's such a great movie. I love this movie, personally speaking. I love this movie. I watched it a lot when I was like growing up, but like I really mean growing up, like 10 to 13 years old. I probably watched it a lot, and I revisited it lately. And hold on. Okay, I
Which
revisited it lately, and I watched it like I watched it for 3 nights ago, and I watched it every single day since
I
because
was gonna say,
I love everything about this movie right now. I think it's brilliant. What did you think of it, Jacob?
I I thought it was great. I actually tried to rewatch it myself, but I rented it on my PlayStation that ran out, so I wasn't able to revisit. So I just like watched it clip by clip on YouTube via just to like refamiliarize. But no, it's great. It's also interesting because you being someone who saw this probably multiple times in the past like 2 decades, and I saw it for the first time relatively recently.
Oh yeah, the faculty used to have like a pretty big cult following. It probably still does, but it's not out
Not
now
that
just
I
catching on with the next generation. And I want more people to definitely see it. It's worth loving.
The people I know who have seen it are primarily the people who already are like reappraising most 90s slasher movies and or like 90s horror in general, which is an era I quite love.
I love it too. Anyone who's familiar with my channel right now, I have like a borderline obsession with the projects that Kevin Williamson works on. So like I love Scream and Scream 2. I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, Dawson's Creek. I love all of it. I think it's all great. And Faculty, of course, was written by Kevin Williamson. He didn't come up with the story. I know he was called in for a rewrite, I believe, because of how popular Scream was, but he rewrote so much of it and he substantially changed enough of it so that he had solo screenwriter credits on the film. And we can this film is just oozing with Williamson isms. Like it feels very much like a Williamson kind of movie. I irritate some people by giving Kevin Williamson so much authorial credit. But I really think that films like The Faculty, Scream, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, Dawson's Creek have a ridiculous amount in common. Like the same kind of stock characters in different situations, but all postmodern situations. And
and it's usually I feel like it's usually pretty relatively easy to find the line between what's Williamson, what's whatever director or producer he happens to be working with. Like in Scream probably is the most obvious because it's very easy to differentiate like what's a Williamson thing and what's a Craven thing, especially
yeah.
when you know like a New Nightmare and or even the
Oh,
original Nightmare.
New
It puts a
Nightmare
lot.
is great. Like a lot of people do like to wrongly say that Craven wasn't interested in postmodernism until Scream, but New Nightmare I think it was intensely influential on Scream as well. I think it
Even
was
if
a
you watch his early stuff, but
sure, sure.
to varying degrees.
To varying degrees, of course. But Williamson really he tapped into I guess he kind of defined a large part of 90s, not just cinema, but 90s youth culture. The words hip and trendy and Kevin Williamson projects went hand in hand. And it's interesting to watch these films because they were like intensely popular at the time, or at least relatively so. And the films still feel complicated. They still feel well made, especially this one, The Faculty we're talking about with Robert Rodriguez directed this one. And I've always said that Robert Rodriguez is really good at adapting other people's work, like Frank Miller, Quentin Tarantino. We brought up James Cameron earlier. He's really good at translating other people's ideas to the screen, and he does that pretty immediately with Kevin Williamson's screenplay here. He seemed to understand every piece of it, and it's interesting because Robert Rodriguez isn't someone I would call postmodern. Isn't someone I would
Well,
really call anything but an action
yeah.
filmmaker.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest. I think there's some postmodern leanings, but like nothing particularly substantial in stuff like Spy
Like
Kids. Like Spy
it's
Kids, it's
just
more in the sake of the joke.
exactly. I don't know if they're postmodern leanings or just like he was making films in the 90s and his best friend was
Yeah,
Quentin Tarantino. Like I don't know how
exactly.
much of it is like earnest or how much of it is just, I mean, which that sounds like a criticism of him, and it possibly is, but he understood this Kevin Williamson script, which is like deliberately postmodern, and he at least seemed to demonstrate complete understanding of the postmodern flourishes of the faculty.
Hmm.
Um,
And there
and
is like a trust thing because Williamson was originally going to direct it, or at least was in
yeah,
talks to direct it. But
and then I think he was given like an ultimatum, like he could either direct that one or Teaching Mrs. Tingle, and he went with Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which was an okay movie. It was good. It's a good movie. I'll be covering it eventually on the channel. It's just we'll get into it later, but it was released post Columbine, and it's a story about kids tying up their mean history teacher and being vindicated for it in the end.
which never happened in any other Williamson project.
Right? The auteurism is here, man. But what did you think of like the opening of the movie? What were your first thoughts on it?
But it just felt nice. It felt so nice. The Offspring opening and the football player, the Dimension logo, because the Dimension logo is like particular, like for the time I grew up in, was just such like a thing that's familiar to me. It really, I don't know. I I've really like I've just fallen in love with this period of horror movie this year. Or I should
Oh,
say I re-fell in love with it because it's like something that's I only recently realized is just such a part of my life in a way I didn't realize it was. And
yeah, I
then
was wildly obsessed with these movies when I was like in fifth grade. I remember like like being completely obsessed with the Scream films, for instance. I thought they were so good. I re fell in love with them as well within the last year or so.
I
And
think for me, it's because I didn't watch a lot of these movies in like early childhood or like my teens. Most of them I discovered like around the time I started college, but it's I think it's more because as a teenager I was just incredibly obsessed with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that was like
oh
such a
yeah,
formative thing for me. Which even though it's obviously completely unrelated to Williamson, it feels very in tune with his obsessions and interests.
I love
And
Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well. I mean, if
yeah,
you want to do like defining teen voices of American
exactly.
90s, Joss Whedon and Kevin Williamson would be neck and neck there with Scream and Dawson's Creek and fucking Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel on the other side. Like they would both be there.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me
Especially
that it's
like postmodernists
yeah,
too. I mean, Jesus. I mean, I know that Joss is more like existential leaning than Williamson. I'd like to know who you think is more cynical, Whedon or Williamson.
Whedon for sure. Because the faculty I told you about, like the faculty is almost to me almost more a riff on the Breakfast Club than it is on Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like the imagery it plays with, and I'd really like to know if that was always the case. Like if because I like
I
you said,
I really
Williamson
doubt it.
rewrote it.
Yeah,
because
I really
Williamson
doubt that was
rewrote
the
it.
case because I want to say like that, bringing in those stock characters and
It's
deconstructing
so
them,
obvious.
that's very Williamson.
It's in some cases like he directly just rips the visuals from the
Yeah,
film. He in the case of like Stokely's visuals, like like the way she looks and dresses in the beginning and then how she looks and dresses at the end and being with the jock character at the end. It's a complete riff on the Breakfast Club. But to return to the thing about Joss Whedon and Kevin Williamson, that's interesting to me because it's so optimistic, especially compared to like the Breakfast Club, which I think is incredibly pessimistic, or at least cynical, or at least short-sightedly cynical. Like it doesn't realize it's
right.
being cynical, but it's incredibly cynical because they just trade one social role for another, and it's framed in a way that's arguably more postmodern in that like it's just you're trading one prison for another. But whereas in the Faculty it ends with them kind of liberated and
Well,
self-actualized. But the thing
one
with
of the most
Joss,
interesting things, yeah. No, no, go on. Yeah,
oh, I was gonna say the thing with Joss is that like Joss just says, "Yeah, Buffy's just gonna eat shit and die," like constantly.
yeah, true.
Like season 6 is just one long season about how she's horribly depressed and wants to die,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
all
and it's a
because her friends thought they did the right thing. And so like there's the hate sex out of your Burger King, part-time job. So it's
yeah, and that's
incredibly
a
depressing.
very polarizing season as well. I mean, you go
It's
from
my
really
favorite.
interesting, of course it is. You go from really interesting big bads to three incels. It's quite a step in a different direction. But I love Buffy. I think that Kevin Williamson does cynicism really well, but he's a postmodern sentimentalist, which doesn't sound like it goes together, but it really does when you think that every Scream film is technically a film about triumph for Sidney
Yeah,
Prescott. Most of the films end with her walking to inspirational music at the end, like she
it's
just
weird though.
overcame something.
With Scream
That's,
though, it's always kind of bittersweet, I think.
well, it should be bittersweet, but it's still sweet. Like
Yeah,
it's
well,
still
like
incredibly
bittersweet
sweet.
in the
Same with
sense
I
that
Know
like
What You Did Last Summer. If I Know What You Did Last Summer is a film of maturity, the kids
for sure.
mature. Like
Yeah.
there is a success happening. The Faculty is almost so sweet. It's like saccharine. It's like very very sweet. That
It's
everyone's
definitely the
living their best
sweetest.
possible life.
It's the
Um,
sweetest because like I Know What You Did Last Summer ends with like victory, but it also ends with like Sarah Michelle Gellar like dying in the most horribly depressing way. And it's
right.
just like, and the same thing with like Scream 2. It's just like constant tragedy, but then it's like they overcome it in the end. So there, yeah, I would say he's more positive.
He's more positive. He can do cynicism very well, but I think that he is one of those because we do have name drops in this film of Spielberg and Emmerich and Lucas
Yes,
and,
yes,
and
that's a
people
great
like
scene.
that. And I know that Kevin Williamson is a huge Spielberg fan. In fact, like Dawson Leary on Dawson's Creek is like a is so obsessed with Spielberg films that it like stifles his maturity because he feels that everything should be cinematic and sentimental and meaningful when like not everything is. Um, but I think that Williamson does have that kind of thing of he might be godless and cynical, but I think he believes that in cinema you should have what you can't probably in the normal life. Give
Yeah,
something sweet out of it. That sort of thing. You brought up Invasion of the Body Snatchers earlier, and I want to irritate people who are listening, like old school sci-fi fans, by saying this film has also a lot in common with The Thing, John Carpenter's film, which I do really like.
yes.
I think it's great. But I think the drug test scene in The Faculty outdoes John Carpenter in The Thing when they're testing to see who's a monster or not.
It's
I
such a
love
fucking wonderful scene.
the drug test is so fucking good, wonderfully acted, wonderful handheld camera, most likely shot by Rodriguez himself, because I normally see him on set actually operating the equipment. It's so well done. These kids, I mean, ostensibly they're just holding guns to each other's heads and forcing them to do designer drugs in in like a cottage house or in like a garage somewhere. That just guns to people's heads, forcing them to do drugs, and they do act like they're high on drugs while they're doing this.
The and then they go kill their teacher.
Yeah, which gets us into because Williamson's trajectory was so good. Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream 2, and The Faculty. Even Teaching Mrs. Tingle would have been a lot better bigger had it not been for the Columbine killings in 1999. And it only feels problematic when you get to that amazing scene in the gymnasium where these fucking kids high on scat tie up their principal, try to get her to do drugs, and then shoot her in the head for not complying. And it's really cool looking, and it looks amazing. It's a cool scene full of style, like, and
It's
it's only problematic in retrospect. But I think Williamson had always tapped into, like we were talking about, he was tapping into the cynicism in youth culture of the late 90s. It's just not even he could have known it was about to explode, but it makes watching those late 90s films it gives them a different kind of layer of complexity to them, because they were tapping into something that was just going untreated, for
yeah.
sure.
No, it is. It feels like again, to go back to the Breakfast Club, which by the way, I don't really like the Breakfast Club, but just in case it seems like I'm talking about it a lot, but it's just what was on my mind the most while watching.
I
It
liked it.
feels,
It's good.
I have mixed feelings on it. But it does feel like the natural progression of like the same sentiments that were in that film about like how you feel about adults. It's just like in the 80s that meant you smoke weed in the library, whereas in the 90s it meant you fucking kill everybody. It's just
Yeah.
it within like a decade, not even. It just the entire landscape of that changed. And I
No,
think the film reflects
absolutely.
that really well. Really, really well reflects that.
It's
Especially
wild watching Williamson's catalog. Is like it's hard to believe that it came out before the kind of hysteria, the craze, the pattern of school shootings, of mass shootings committed by young media obsessed white men. It's really weird considering that Scream 2 came out before. It's hard to imagine that, considering
and
Mickey's entire motive of that film is I'm gonna blame the movies, and I'm a psychopath because I watch too many movies. Or that Billy and Stu, it's the exact
yeah.
same thing. It's just a bit more fleshed out in Scream 1. But like, along with some Freudian mommy issues, which we'll go into Freud with the faculty a little later.
Yeah.
But Williamson just tapped into this thing that was untreated, undiagnosed, and I think he's postmodern enough to understand too that he might have some culpability as well, because if you show something, he also understands that cinema can pre-diagnose something, or make you think you have a problem when you don't. That's the problem with stock characters, but you can't not use a stock character that has all of these problems that you feel like you should have in your own life, or else you don't even belong to an archetype. Like, you feel
Yeah.
like he understands that as well. But that drug test scene, like, holy fucking shit! Everyone was nailing their lines, from Josh Hartnett. Like, it was kind of unnerving because he was trying to, posture like he could take his own supply or whatever and not get high. But when he breaks, it's like, oh shit, he's the one holding the gun. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know exactly what's going to happen. And Elijah Wood and Sean Hatozi's character are just, they've
The two
lost it.
girls are going and Elijah just goes showdown. It's so good.
It's hilarious. It's a fucking phenomenal scene, captured by Rodriguez really well. And I've seen interviews with Williamson talking about how much he admires Rodriguez's composition here. That he actually brought like the rhythm of the script. He translated that like wonderfully. It's
Yeah.
unnerving and it's restless and it keeps moving.
There's parts early on, like in when it's introducing the characters at the school, that has something of like a weird cross between like Alex Cox, who's someone I'm a big fan of, Alex Cox, or like Richard Kelly, just like the way he drifts through the school.
And I do love the character introductions, and they serve like multiple purposes. I like that it's stylistically resonant with 90s. I think of like Train Spotting being one of the most famous
Yeah,
examples of
yeah,
freeze framing on a character to make them seem cinematic or like a bit larger than life. But it works in the faculty even more so because there are so many extraneous characters that you might be focusing on the wrong character. It's telling
yeah.
you the exact six that you're supposed to be worried about.
And
It's
with
just
this
using
cast,
characters.
that's an easy concern because
Mm-hmm.
you see like Usher in this movie, and you're like,
Usher, fucking Usher. Yeah, and you're not supposed to worry about Usher. He's just supposed to
you're
be
not.
there.
He's just in the movie. He's just some guy in the movie. I don't even think you hear his name.
You might. I don't know.
I
Jesus. All he does is bully Elijah Wood and then stick
Yeah,
slugs in people's ears.
or John Stewart. John Stewart's in it. Uh,
Yeah.
God, who else?
I was describing the cast of the film to Justin from the Stylist Substance YouTube channel, and he said, "This sounds like it's the thin red line of slasher movies." And it was a really good description of it because everyone is in this movie and in a pretty memorable part as well.
Yeah,
Um, but the most unlikely, if you looked at a box and it had Usher Raymond, Jon Stewart, Piper Laurie, and like fucking Elijah Wood's name on the back, that would be really weird. It's really weird just seeing from the creators of Desperado and Scream.
yeah.
That's a weird combination. Like, it seems like it really shouldn't have worked as well as it does, but it's perfectly translated. And just to recognize maybe some of the sci-fi purists here, like this is a science fiction film, but I'm talking about it with more of a slasher kind of analytical language because I feel that that's what Kevin Williamson brought to the movie. It's
Yeah,
definitely told in a slasher structure. We have these stock characters picked off one by one, and in the end, one of them's the killer, and they get to monologue about their motive. Like, it's the same kind of shit.
no, for sure. It follows the patterns pretty much to a T from all everything from that era, not just Scream.
Yeah.
Just like urban legend.
Mm-hmm. Urban legend. I know what you did last summer.
Yes.
Fucking everything. Um, Mostly
Oh,
everything that Williamson had a hand in making.
I was
Uh,
gonna, yeah, or at least influenced, if nothing else.
I mean, he even
Um,
wrote the original outline for Halloween H2O. So like his hand
did he?
was
Oh,
everywhere. Yeah.
that makes
Like
sense.
he basically defined. Yeah, it makes sense considering we got Josh Hartnett and Michelle Williams in that movie. Incestuous link between Dawson's Creek and slasher movies, and it's all because of Kevin. But
Yeah.
this is a phenomenal film. It's ridiculously fun. Um, Fuck, man, I love the character of Zeke. When I was
Yeah,
growing up,
you clicked with Zeke a lot, didn't you?
I loved Zeke. Even from when I was like 10 or 11 watching it for the first time. I was like, I love any character named Zach. You know, Zach, the best Power Ranger. I mean, we have the same name. It's got to be the best character. But this guy's named Zeke, and I'm like, close enough. He looks really cool. He has that 90s style down of like that long sleeve shirt with the t shirt over it, with like,
Yeah.
I don't know how Josh Hartnett pulls off that hair. Flat on top, but
That's what
like,
I was thinking the exact same thing while watching it. I was, why
pulls it
doesn't he
off.
look
I
like
would look like a clown with that.
he
I
looks
can't
like
do that.
it's the haircut like your mom gets you when you're 9. It's so funny, but he looks cool.
He
And I was
looks
thinking about how
fucking
like
awesome.
they try to hide it on the poster too. If you look at the poster, like they try to like make the hair not look like that. It's really funny actually. Like his hair looks a little different on the poster. It's because they knew he looked fucking stupid, but he doesn't.
I don't know how he pulls it off, but he does. That's more than 90s chic. That's like
Yeah.
definitive. I feel bad for all the kids who saw Josh Hartnett's hair in this movie and tried it out. I might have been one of them. I don't remember. I definitely did that T-shirt over the long shirt thing. But
No, that's I mean, there's also on the other side, there's all the people that benefited from Stokely's character. All,
mm-hmm.
all the people that got a better aesthetic out of that, and then all the people that got a worse aesthetic out of Josh Hartnett.
I love how cheeky Williamson can be because, like, when Stokely is saying I'm not actually gay, I just use it as self-defense to keep people away from me. Mary Beth goes, complex. I'm like, Jesus Christ, Kevin.
My that was I noticed that one. That's not my favorite one though. My favorite one was when Zeke is talking about like amphibians, and they're like, "You seem to know everything," and he just like looks at me. He's like, "I'm a contradiction," and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
shut the fuck up!
And then
Shut
earlier
the
in a scene with Miss Burke, he answers the Caruso question in a really insightful way and goes, "I'm a genius." Like he tells you
and,
exactly what he is over and over again. It's
and then he
beautiful. And
just
they
goes
mention,
to his car and he starts passing out cherry flavored condoms to teachers.
oh, which gets us into my monologue about
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 Freud.
about Freud's Medusa's head. Because my favorite scenes are technically, so far as the narrative of the film go, they're technically extraneous. They could have been left on the cutting room floor,
Yeah,
and it wouldn't have affected the movie at all. I love the scenes between Zeke and Miss Burke, played wonderfully by Famke Janssen in this film. I love these scenes.
yeah,
They have,
she's great.
oh, she is phenomenal,
She's so good.
and so I was doing some research on this film online, and there's a popular reading of this Freudian dialogue interplay that's going on in these scenes that Robert Rodriguez completely understood because he amps the metaphor up to like 100. He completely understood the Freudian concepts of this film. But what happens to Miss Burke is that at first you see her and she's really timid and really like insecure or inhibited at least, and once she gets infected by the parasite, by the alien slug thing, she becomes more aggressive. Well, not just more aggressive. She becomes entirely aggressive and more colorful and more sexual, really more erotic. And what happens to her is that she attacks Zeke's character and jumps into his car, and Zeke drives into a bus. We get a wonderful Rodriguez-style explosion for no reason, which I love and appreciate.
Yeah.
And Miss Burke flies out of the windshield and her head comes off. She's decapitated, but then you see her head kind of walking around on these tentacles, these snake-like kind of things back to her body, and that's where we get a Freudian concept of the Medusa's head. I can think from a screen, from an essay. I almost said a screenplay. Imagine if Freud wrote movies, but from an essay
He
from
might as
Freud.
well have.
It might as well. He's in basically every horror movie
He's
represented in some capacity.
he's the Williamson of Hitchcock. That way.
Ooh, that's perfect. But I'm gonna read a little bit from this article because it puts it better than I could put it in my own words. But it's just, why fucking do that? These guys are probably a lot smarter. But the Freud's Medusa's head is about equating decapitation with castration. Medusa was the reflection of the castration complex aroused in the young boy when the sight of the female genitals brought home the truth that females have no penis. And Medusa's head was worn by Athena, the virgin goddess. Freud considered that as a result of wearing it, she became unapproachable, who repelled all sexual desires by carrying symbolically the genitals of the mother. It's kind of like female sexuality feared but not desired. So I think that all of that is completely exposed and translated and expressed in these three scenes, especially in that second scene where she's like pushing on him and he's like, "What's wrong with you, woman?" or something like that. And she goes, "Woman? Did you just say woman?
Yeah,
I'm sick of
yeah.
you, little boy." It's like she's recognizing that he's recognizing her gender, that she has that she is a sexual person, that's possible within their relationship. And he's realizing that teachers aren't just members of the faculty, but they are, in Freudian language, they're sexual. They have vaginas, and it's like he's realizing that through these conversations. So the first conversation, and by the way, we know this is problematic.
Yeah, yes,
Even
yes.
though they make the point of
They
saying
go
like
out of their
5 times.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, they go out of their way 5 times to say that Zeke was repeating his senior year, which makes him a legal adult. We still know this is a very problematic kind of power dynamic situation, and the age is questionable. But this is 1998, and horror is problematic by definition of its genre. And Freud is one of the most problematic psychoanalysts on the planet. And so, if we're dealing with Freudian dialogue, I think this is really well expressed, and it adds to an eeriness and unnerviness that should be visible in most horror movies. But like in the first scene with Miss Burke, Zeke is basically humiliating her because this is when she's really inhibited, insecure, shy, and she lacks a lot of confidence. And he basically humiliates her by trying to give her these condoms, like insinuating that she's repressed in a lot of ways without actually recognizing her as an erotic creature. And it's not until the slug thing happens to her, which happens off screen, by the way. We don't actually see that happen.
Oh, that's
But
true.
it's very clear when the transformation does happen, though, because she is pure GoldenEye Bond girl, fucking aggressive and like something to behold, something wild, and just pushing him. And like the second scene is is her humiliating him over not having parents, over I think like low key over finally realizing that he's attracted to her. I mean, spoiler alert, they end up together at the end of the film.
Vaguely end up together. It's a really weird scene. It's that last shot.
I think it's it wonderfully expresses the teenage awakening of, oh, I'm thinking about fucking my teachers.
Yeah.
But I think more problematically, it's vice versa as well. She's realizing that young men have genitals, um,
Yes, yeah.
and
It's
that's where the horror aspect comes in.
and it's not even the most fucked up part of the movie. That's the
No,
funniest
it's
part.
not. But just
It,
one last thing about it. I mean, that scene where she does get decapitated, it starts off. I love how it's blocked. It's set up. He's going to his car to get the extra scat because the
oh,
drugs are how they defeat the alien. And before he puts down the trunk, he can sense her there.
he
It
already knows
foreshadows
she's
from the
there.
beginning. And he's like, "Hello, Miss Burke," because it perfectly foreshadows from the first scene that they had together. And it's the inverse of it. It's one is the aggressor and one is literally running away from this sexual woman, like who is really coming on to him. I mean, she says she doesn't want drugs; she wants something else, which is very
Cherry
heavily saying
flavored
that she
condom.
wants the cherry flavored condoms, and it's an incredible scene. And that's what I'm saying. These scenes are extraneous. Famke Janssen's character does not play into solving the film's problems or adding to the narrative. It's extraneous,
I don't even think
but I
she
love
meets
it.
any of the other characters.
No, she's in like one scene in the faculty lounge. I'm not sure if she has lines, but she's there. It's an establishing shot of her there. But every other scene, if you pay attention to the blocking, like there's a scene where Zeke walks up to her with Mary Beth and like Danny Masterson and the kid from Dazed and Confused behind him. She's not there with them. She's only there with Josh Hartnett. Like she was there specifically for those Josh Hartnett scenes.
Yeah,
Think that Williamson was big enough at this point that they weren't going to cut anything out because they were like, this is a winning formula. We're going to let him do his thing. I think in other cases, those scenes would have been cut or not filmed at all. But I'm so glad that they're there because they tell their own narrative, a meta narrative within this.
yeah.
Within what I would call a pretty a specifically late '90s postmodern masterpiece. So far as I'm concerned, I really do love this movie. And Jacob, I am so happy now because I think we covered everything that was lost. And now
We
we can
did. We're in unknown territory. We're in unknown territory. So let's talk about Elijah Wood.
Elijah, yeah, let's go character beat by character beat. Elijah Wood, the freaky Stephen King kid, as described by Delilah,
Yes, it's funny
doomed to
because
a certain fate.
I recently read Salem's Lot, and he's
Hmm.
basically what's the kid's name? Because there's that book has like a Mike, Mark.
Salem's
It's
Lot is
fucking
my favorite King book for sure.
it's great.
He reminded me of that character when if Williamson was a pure cynical like nihilist. The scene
Mm.
where he defeats the Queen and those slugs just like shoot into his face like from a
Phased.
porcupine or something. Like I remember the kid from Salem's Lot like understanding how to get out of a situation and then all of a sudden making a situation worse. Like there's a scene where I think in Salem's Lot where he's like hanging from a chair or something. Something's happening and he's trying to
Yeah,
get out of
it's
that.
he's captured by the human who works for the vampire Barlow,
Mm.
and the kid's name is Mark Petrie, and he hangs Mark from the ceiling like with his arms and legs behind him. So like his arms are behind his back and dangling from a fan, and he gets out of that. And like Elijah Wood's, I mean, if this was a Stephen King thing, like after the end of the movie, Elijah Wood just be irreparably fucked. He'd just
He
be
would be.
though
It'd be a
no. If this was a Stephen King thing, what would happen is at the end, Elijah Wood, no one would believe him, and he would assert that it was aliens, and he would live out the rest of his life as an outcast who everyone thinks is psychotic. Instead, the faculty has this weird, like, uncharacteristic fairy tale ending where I mean, he's still controversial, but they're like, is he a genius? Is he crazy? And he becomes this like public figure who's
Yep, and he
every,
gets the hot girl
he
and
gets the hot girl, which is so weird because Delilah's the character who gets just worse as the movie goes on. Arguably the only character that gets
I
worse.
love Delilah. Fun
It's
fact,
great.
Jessica Alba auditioned for that role but didn't
I'm
get
not
it.
surprised.
I'm not
She's
surprised either.
she's in a way she's like a Buffy character, like
Like a Cordelia.
yeah, that's the name. I was trying to think of a name. Cordelia type character where it's just like this person's just getting worse. And
I love her so much.
no, it's
Sh
awesome.
she's deeply, deeply problematic. I mean,
It's so
how
funny
many
though.
times does she have to shame Stokely, right?
Stokely, like her boyfriend, Elijah, and
Yeah.
Stokely, like every Stokely's my favorite character, but no,
What's interesting is there's like a sense of sexual liberation in a lot of the women when they get overcome by the alien. Like Mary Beth walks around naked and makes Josh Hartnett feel very uncomfortable, which is interesting as they had chemistry earlier.
mm,
And we've gone over how Miss Burke transforms, but when she does, if we're led to believe that the night that Elijah Wood was like grounded in his room was the night that Delilah got infected by the slug worm thing. And the next day at
yes,
school, we see her inhibited with glasses and a ponytail and like an
yes,
ill-fitting shirt. And like the opposite happens to her. I know she might be putting on an act because she's an alien now, but it just at every possible turn, at every possible chance, Delilah gets worse. Is what I'm agreeing with you about.
yeah.
She can't even do being overtaken by a parasite correctly because she's still shaming people in the fucking drug test scene. She's one of the best parts of it, not only because she's the one who tests positive for having an alien in you, but
And
because of the
that's
shit she's saying to everyone beforehand. Like, it's like Mary Beth going like, I can't take this because I'm allergic, and she goes, and I'm Portuguese. Who gives a fuck? Like,
that I know we're past that scene, but that's also such a good like setup for the moment because it directs you towards Delilah and away from Mary Beth.
it
So
does.
I mentioned to you that I think like if there's one thing I think is kind of like a cheap shot that I'm just like I'll give it to Rob and the gang because it which is like you don't actually like this the shots of Delilah inhaling or not Delilah, Mary Beth inhaling the drug, and then this shot later where it's like, no, she actually used her pink to like flick the pen off, or whatever. Like I
Well,
think
yeah,
it's kind of a cheap shot, but I also think it works in context because like the way that that scene is set up is that Delilah's the focus because she's the one most
yeah.
suspicious in the situation.
No, it's great.
Um,
The scene doesn't work because I throw it the bone completely. I like that it's a cheap shot. I think this film
yeah,
should
oh, no, I
have at
think
least
it's
one
charming.
cheap
I
shot.
think it's really fun
They
that
didn't
it does that.
demonstrate that these people can block their like nasal pathways. They didn't demonstrate that ever, that
I
that could happen. Um, but I'm fine
all
with it.
no, I am too. I also because that whole sequence does such a good job of you could argue that the movie would work fine without the Breakfast Club element, which I know I'm hyperfixating on, but like the Breakfast Club element of like breaking out their norms. Like I feel like that element would be there anyway, and people would read into it. But that scene does such a good job of clarifying that that's the fucking point of the movie because
Yeah.
they talk about how they've been failing to fulfill their roles specifically, and then that's what makes them suspicious. Like they're suspicious to the others precisely because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Specifically, I
That
think of what's his name, the jock character.
Stan.
Yeah, Stan, because they say like Stan, it's pretty weird that you quit the football team. That's not something you would do. So they immediately think they pull a gun on him and they're like, you might be the alien. And it's such
That
a
I
good
was about to
moment.
bring that up. That's where the rhythm picks up in that scene, and that's where it becomes amazing to me. Is
That's where it just clicked in
when
my
she's
head.
like,
I was like, oh,
I'm just pointing out your slightly odd behavior, and he goes, I'm not an alien. I'm discontent, and he says it so well, and we get into this amazing rhythm like
oh,
from then on, because then the
it's
gun
such a
comes
good
out,
moment. It's
and
it's such a good
Jesus,
moment. It just clicked in my head when that happened. I was like, oh my God, I see what they're doing with the scene. Like that's such a good just link between the two
it's
poles of the
nails it.
film.
It does something that I know is not possible for any other slasher movie to do, but I love being able to see like the corpses of these characters post becoming infected by alien and like them uninhibited and like carving holes into like the remaining archetypes' chests. Like I love seeing Delilah appear on the school bus to just deconstruct and pull apart Casey for like 30 seconds until he runs away. I love one of the scenes from my youth that I remember so much is Stan, after they shoot their principal in the head, Stan goes out to see if they're okay, and sees that the coach and all the football team are being weird ass aliens in the rain, and he gets turned in that situation. But he comes back to the door, and it really comes down to Sean Hatosi as well and Clea Duvall being such great actors. When he goes to do the drug to prove to them that he's Stan, and then just pours it out with a little like
Yes.
sly grin on his face, and goes,
Yes.
"Open the door," and it's like it's amazing that the exchanges that Stokely and Stan have in that moment, it just carves it so deep. It is unexpectedly moving in that moment. I like seeing what I call like the zombies or the ghosts of these archetypes come back to fuck with the few remaining ones. It's really interesting to me. Not an opportunity we normally get in slasher movies, but it's quite a welcome one though. So Casey, Delilah, I guess we talked to who are we talking about now?
Uh, how much did we talk about Stokes?
Not
Stokely.
enough. Let's go into
No,
Stokely.
I love Stokely. Just set her up as a lesbian, and then 10 minutes into the movie, she just says, "I'm not a lesbian," and I'm like,
It's
it's
to
so.
protect myself from. It's complex, actually. Um,
I did mention to you that I like how she's the most like explicit reference to the Breakfast Club, like the most obvious one, like down to the clothing in the throughout the film and then in the
down
finale,
to like the meta arc of being in love with the jock and then
and
switching
then
to
wearing like
colorful
the pink
clothing.
clothes and or something of that to that effect. But whereas in the first in the that movie, it feels like so restrictive and disappointing almost, like, at least for me, like watching it, especially because I love that character in that film, and so it's always disappointing to me that moment, whereas in this it's the exact same arc, but it doesn't feel disappointing
It's
or
wild.
restrictive to her because it feels like she's not changing herself for someone in that situation. She doesn't change for other people at any point in the film, or at least like beyond pretending to be a lesbian, but like she doesn't change herself, and she just embraces that side of herself instead of like being told that that's what she should be doing. It's really, really good. It's actually like I think maybe the most like intelligent inversion
Yeah.
in the whole film, or it's like the most subtle one.
Well,
To me, it's very interesting.
it definitely has to do with Stan as well. We keep referring to him as a jock, but the whole
You don't even
arc of
see him
his
really play.
character, well, the whole thing is that he's not one anymore, is that he
Yeah,
quit.
literally from
um,
like the opening scene, when you first see him is the moment
because
he decides to
I,
give up
I
on
think
it.
a part of the way that postmodern sentimentality works is that I don't remember Emilio Estevez's character in The Breakfast Club having to modify or change
He doesn't. No,
for the
I watched
character.
it relatively recently, earlier this year.
Where it feels
No,
here
he
that
doesn't.
Stan also changed. Like Stan also changed. Not necessarily they didn't change for each other. They just changed and became a good. It felt like a good fit. Stan also changed. He was no longer. He was. What was his line? He was content to be a D student or something
Yeah,
like.
no,
That was
he
my
has a
D.
monologue where he says, "I want that D. I earned that D. I worked hard to get that D." That's what he says,
And what did
and
our
it's really
homegirl Delilah say? Like,
I forget.
let me know how that yellow brick road for a brain goes. Like that. Like the
that
yellow brick
that
quest for a brain. Beautiful.
Delilah might be the only character that actually changes for someone else,
She
and
does.
might be because she's the only like self-obsessed one in the movie. Because the other four all either change at the beginning of the movie, like they're already in the process of changing, or like they don't really change, they just be more honest, if that
Yeah,
makes
well,
sense.
Elijah Wood, Casey certainly comes out of his shell and becomes the hero he imagined
Yeah,
himself. But we should talk about Stokely and Casey's scene in the library. One of the
yes.
most Williamson of Williamson scenes I can think of.
I knew when that scene happened, I was like, of course the scene's happening. I knew it had to happen, where they're directly describing the lineage of films that led to the faculty.
Mm-hmm.
It's very good. The
It
genealogy.
It is wild. And then he puts on that extra postmodern layer. I'm not entirely impressed with the idea that Spielberg and Lucas and Emmerich are all aliens. I'm particularly interested in the line of like, forget it's science fiction, but forget the science part. They
Science.
get at us through the fiction. And then Stokely says something akin to, "You're telling us that they create these they're ETs, they're Men in Blacks, they're wonderful little worlds of full of happiness, just so that when that thing actually does happen, we don't consider it as being real or authentic." She says something to that
No,
line. I'm
I
like,
thought that was beautiful.
yeah,
And
and I
it
thought, Williamson, you nailed it. I don't know how you nailed it within these parameters of this scene, which has to go by very quickly, and they're whispering very fast, but you did it.
that scene really, because so much of the horror genre that has resonated with me for whatever reasons, part of, like probably the first film I ever loved was The Sixth Sense, you know.
Hmm.
And the core thing about that film is that Cole, the kid in the film, is just silently suffering because he doesn't want to talk about anything because he knows no one's going to believe him, which is like obviously like a very real thing so many people and children in the world go through. And I think like this, the faculty taps into that a bit with like Elijah Wood, because like what's happening to him is happening, but like he's not allowed to go to people because of fiction and because of the way like stories and drama have like restricted people's ability to like conceive certain things happening. You know, like his
Yeah.
parents are never going to believe him when his life is in danger. You know, no one, teachers aren't going to believe him, his parents aren't going to believe him, so he's just completely isolated from the world. And I don't know, I always resonate with characters like that. I think it's a really just upsetting, but also like it's nice to it's something only horror can do, you know, because it's an important conceit in horror is that they're not believed. Because if they're not believed, then you have a plot. I don't know. It's just really really interesting.
Science fiction movie. She knows all the rules. She
Yeah,
knows an in-depth knowledge of. I, Williamson is so cheeky because deflects criticism. You go, well, you have to disregard Invasion of the Body Snatchers because that was a blatant ripoff of the Puppet Masters.
yeah. Oh,
Like,
I
so
love that
do you
line.
disregard the faculty as well? Do you disregard the faculty for being a blatant ripoff of the Thing and Invasion of the Body Snatchers? That's beautiful.
That's such a good
Beautiful.
line because like he presents this whole intricate explanation for everything that's happening. She's like, no, he's just some hack writer who ripped off someone else.
Mm-hmm. But I even it gets even cheekier when Casey goes, "You're not buying any of this, are you?" And she goes, "No, but it's pretty cool though."
Yeah,
So
she
even as an audience member, if you're cynical of the film that you're watching, like most people aren't really in on postmodern jokes, like you're like, "Yeah, I'm with Stokely on this. It sounds cool, but it's dumb." And
it's
it's
great.
beautiful scene because it's Williamson does his little balancing act perfectly well of recognizing criticisms levied to the film before the film is even
And
made.
responding to the criticisms before the criticisms are even made. That's right.
Exactly, and Williamson does this fantastic thing that the characters, when they become overtaken by this parasite, are more human. They are more.
Yes,
They're
my favorite is what's the actor, the guy, he was in Terminator 2, Robert
oh, Robert
Patrick. Robert
Patrick.
Patrick.
How have we gone this far without saying Robert
Yes, I was
Patrick
gonna say,
is
especially when he
something
opens the
else?
movie. He opens the movie. Um, so good. It's great because he's like when Sean what Stan tells him that he quit the team, he's just like, all right, I think that sounds swell. He's just like, that's great. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for not reaming me, coach. And he said, well, what kind of human being would I be if I did that?
It's
But of course, he says a beautiful Williamson-esque line of like, you seem like you're at the starting point of a great life discovery, son." Like stuff like that. Like hits it on the head. It kills it.
I
These
also love,
characters, yeah, I believe them. Mary Beth's motive is like, I'm sick that you stock characters don't have any growth, no matter how long you've been used and reused in film. Like, well, that's like the
yeah.
meta analysis of her. of her motive as part of it. It's like, I want to make you guys better. And from what we've seen, with most of the people who become overtaken, they are like significantly. Robert Patrick apparently was such a huge fucking asshole before that this version of him is better somehow, which is wild. I mean, the same probably can't be said of Jon Stewart or Salma
No.
Hayek, but still.
God, Jon
Um,
Stewart. What the fuck was he doing?
I'm so happy he was in this, and
It's
like,
so weird.
I love
It
the
took
little. He's a really good actor because he was cucked out by like Zeke in this movie when they're looking at the new organism, and Zeke just takes over the fucking like microscope and is like, "Let me take a look at this." I'm like, "I'm a con." That's where he goes, "I'm a
I'm a
contradiction" or whatever.
contradiction.
And like
That
Jon Stewart's face is just perfect. They're like, "Oh well, I guess I'll let you take over." Like he's really good at that. Or
no,
when
it
he gets his finger bitten and goes, and then no one asks if he's okay, so he preemptively goes, "I'm fine. I'm fine." If anyone was wondering.
it was that one. Him just being in it was surreal to me because I didn't realize it was Jon Stewart because I haven't seen Jon Stewart at that point in his life in like years, so I forgot that's what he looked like.
It's wild seeing him
Like
being stabbed
he's
in the eye with designer drugs and opening his mouth and doing his weird little alien
exactly.
bit. Oh
And
my
that's when Zeke that's I really like that thing because that's when Zeke stabs him in the eye. He falls over the table, falls on the floor, and then Stan just goes Zeke in the hand. He's like, it's already like turning into an action movie. Like he tosses him
God.
the whatever the weapon he was using was, and then goes over and cuts off his fingers.
That's where I think it gets compositionally interesting because Rodriguez, he is a very decent action filmmaker, and we're seeing, to me, a slasher movie made with an action mentality,
Yeah,
and you can see that pretty apparently in the editing. There's one
no,
scene where
100%.
Casey is staring out a window at the
Yeah,
coach in the sprinklers, and like Piper Laurie from Twin Peaks is trying to get his attention, and she has to say
does
his
the
name over
dun
and over
dun.
again. Yeah, and when he like turns his head to look at her, it like quick cuts on her face like 3 times, dun dun dun, and it's like that's not exactly what a horror filmmaker would do, but that's what an action filmmaker would do if you want to make a scene immediate. I, it's really interesting to me. There are good horror framings that I was surprised to see from him. The scene where it's right in the beginning, where the principal runs outside and you think she's safe, and then Piper Laurie's character once again like lifts up these scissors or whatever or pencils. I don't know, knife. I don't know what she has. I forget what she has.
I think it was scissors. Yeah,
I think it was scissors too. But like it frames her perfectly. Like it looks amazing. It looks like Robert Rodriguez spent a lot of time on that one shot, and he is notoriously or infamously someone who doesn't spend a lot of time on a single shot because he like prides himself on finishing movies months early and doing like 5 takes and being done with it. But that one looks like he spent a lot of time on. It's very, I'm gonna say Hitchcockian, even though that's cliche to say, but it truly is.
no, I think the framing fits that description for sure.
And I shouldn't be surprised that Rodriguez is a capable filmmaker, but I was surprised to see how good it translated over. And the delivery of her line, I've always wanted to do that. And then the fade out and then the faculty text, really good editing there, really good setup for that.
I
The
also
faculties. Mhm.
the whole locker room sequence at the end I think it's
Yeah,
exceptional. Which is basically just like the Jurassic Park thing of like he's hiding around the lockers and she's just monologuing to him while hiding from him. I love the
so
shot of her
cool.
walking down the hall like naked and you just see the shadow of the tentacles like sprawled over the room. It's so good.
Because we are seeing the exact filmmakers that Casey described in the scene with Stokely. We're seeing
Oh,
their
you're right.
like deconstructed. We're seeing that. My postmodern like cheer out loud moment is when Zeke is is stealing drug supplies from the school, and he's questioned about it by Mary Beth, who he has with him, and he goes, "I'm just doing my part to the deconstruction of America," and I'm like, Jesus Christ, hell yeah. You're just borrowing these supplies from the school? I like to think of it as stealing. Jesus, Zeke, you fucking
And
unbelievable.
again with the dumb fucking haircut. It's
I don't know how he pulls it off. And like the first time
It's
you see a gun, like Casey's staring at it bewildered, and Zeke goes, "It's called a gun, man." Like, Jesus, Zeke
and
got
then
to be
later
so
he
fucking cool.
yeah, and then he still gets to be on the football team.
And I don't know where I'd be without pointing out another Williamson-ism. He's apparently just allowed to reference his own movies and other people's movies all the time. I don't know how he gets away with it, but he does it all the fucking time. He references his previous work in scripts that other people direct constantly. And in this one, it's right before Miss Burke talks to Zeke for the first time by his car, and he's selling. Such a 1998 movie. He's selling VHS tapes
Oh
to
yeah, yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah.
Yep,
Nev
and they're like,
Campbell.
"Is this Nev Campbell and Jennifer Love Hewitt full frontal?" He's like, "Yep, a party of prettiness." And of course, those are those aren't just two starlets of the '90s. Those are the stars of Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer,
Yeah.
being
Which is
objectified by the most
yeah,
objectionable character in the faculty.
it's a weird way to homage like people who've been in
Mm-hmm.
your movies.
It really is. I mean,
It,
I'm sure he got a
particularly
phone call after
degenerate.
that.
Yeah, no, that's
Yep.
more the kind of thing Joss Whedon would do.
There's so many 90s isms. I love Christopher McDonald taking the porn magazines from underneath Casey's bed, and one of them is just
What?
simply titled Boob.
And then he says, "No more flogging the bishop, buddy."
No more flogging the bishop, buddy. No more internet, no more phone.
And then
So,
he immediately he leaves the room, and Elijah Wood starts doing his '90s computer hacking thing,
yeah, I'm
computer
not even
typing.
sure what he's doing there.
I had no idea. I was trying to figure out what he was trying to do, and I could not figure it out.
Did he operate a fucking robot? That's the only thing I saw happen as an effect of him typing. Like, why would you want to operate a robot? I don't understand. I don't. In the comments, let me know. What was Casey doing before he jumped out the window? Can you please solve this mystery?
Even just like that window is a '90s thing, but like that specific like layout where the window leads to the little roofing part and he falls on the ground. It's like that's the same roof from Nightmare on Elm Street. It's so funny. I love that shit.
It's wonderful. This movie does everything it tries to do so well. I mean, I'm like I could spend an entire video just dissecting the whole Freudian Medusa's head thing, especially the fact that Zeke acts like you know that his teacher has a vagina that she has absolutely no use for. That when she turns, she calls him specifically a dickless, drug-induced waste. Like they specifically talk about each other's genitals. Like I don't know. I just whatever. I'm looking at my notes here, and I saw those two words, and I'm like, okay, I should say that somewhere. That seemed like a good place to say it. But Mary Beth, I think it's time to talk about Mary Beth.
It's
Okay,
astonishing how not obvious it is, considering how obvious it is. And she's
right?
like her accent feels fake the whole movie, and I just chalk that up to like I don't know. People with David Boreanaz got away with it on Angel. I guess I'll accept it
He did
here.
not get
Like,
away with it. He did
yeah,
not get away with that
you
fucking
can't
Irish
see it, but I
accent.
had air quotes when I said got away with it.
Okay.
But no one but myself, I was air quoting got away with it.
Yeah,
No,
Laura
like it
Harris
sounds so
actually pulled
false.
this role off. Laura Harris was amazing. I think that just as a side, Laura Harris and Sean Hatosi both deserved better careers, and Hollywood failed these two actors because
Mhm.
they're incredible. Um,
It's her role in it is interesting because in a I think the reason you don't expect her to be the villain is because she's the audience surrogate for so much of it.
yeah.
Because she's the only one that's not like being deconstructed in some way, and she's the one asking characters
Well,
questions and being given information.
that's the traditional use of a stock character of a new person is that she, just like you, are meeting all of these well-defined characters for the first time. Like you're
Exactly.
supposed, and
Especially
I
because
think
they
you're
all
also
know each
supposed
other.
to be drawn to Zeke like a magnet as well. So like you're playing through that
Mhm.
as well with her. I mean, every possible thing you play through as an audience member, you're playing through with her. You don't
Yeah,
want to shoot designer drugs into your nose. You want to make out with Josh Hartnett in a dark room somewhere, and ultimately, you want to be this like this beautiful uninhibited thing that that has come to wreak havoc. um, I think that Robert Rodriguez really filmed her final scenes incredibly well,
Yeah,
incredibly tastefully, for what it could have been. I think under anyone else, really, um, because it's not like a lewd or a crude scene. Although it's not Species. Although she is a blonde and she's naked through the whole thing, it's not Species. It's something quite different. It's a typical Williamson motive scene where she gets to monologue for about 2.5 minutes about why she's doing this. And I think she brings up some really interesting ideas and points. And of course, the Freudian dialogue doesn't end there. I mean, I've read other analyses of the film, which is about like her swimming in the pool is akin to like the womb, right?
yeah.
Things of that nature. But I think she's is just a wonderfully designed character,
It's
because even when she turns and says, "I'm tired of being something I'm not," it's not like this is a vicious, evil, or cruel character. I don't think that like anything she does betrays the facade from earlier. I think that it's natural progression of that character. If she had an arc, that had to be the arc.
mm, it, and just going back visually, she reminds me of like, did you ever see Life Force?
Yeah,
The
I saw Life
Toby
Force.
Hooper film. Yeah, it reminds me of Life Force. I think that just hit me because for the past like 2 days I've been trying to figure out what that image of her reminded me of. It reminds me of Life
Well,
Force.
Life Force is not one of the most tasteful movies. I'm not sure. It might be
Well,
it might be the lighting that Rodriguez was using in the gymnasium, or the fact that we didn't close up on her ass getting out of the swimming pool. Like he did it very tastefully,
yeah,
considering he's
no,
also
for sure.
someone who he seems to do that fine repeatedly in his work. He seems to respect actors when he has them in situations like that. But it really adds to this film's kind of character too, because the first thing she does is not the first thing, but like when Zeke comes back from the car, like they had a chemistry before. They had a budding romance, if I can put it that way. They were definitely interested in each other. And she completely comes on I don't know how to put it. Jacob, help me out. Like, not like aggressive, but like what? You don't like my naked body? Like that? Like
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's
she
just
is definitely
forward.
more mature than him all of a sudden, because at first it's like he's holding her hand through this drug world of his or whatever, and then the
She's
realization
holding
that your
his hand.
classmate has genitals too. I'm not sure. It could be like a repeat of that, but it like hammers home that the Freudian dialogue that
No,
seems to
I
only.
actually I was thinking that she's kind of a counterpart to that teacher because she does the same thing. She humiliates
Yeah,
him
she
sexually.
does. She really does. And Casey, it's interesting because how do you defeat Casey? You emasculate him as well. Delilah does a much better job of that for Casey, but oh god, the way Laura Harris delivered her lines in that final scene are great. Like when Elijah Wood says, "I'd rather be scared," and she's like, "Fine, this is where your land of fiction gets it right. We win." Like that shouldn't be as well delivered as it is, but Laura Harris really pulls it off. And I do want to compliment when there is an abundance of CGI, it's for like a moment, which means like this
No, I think it
film.
all looks good, to be honest. I was
Yeah, I think this
surprised.
film. I was about to say this film aged pretty damn well, uh,
It
really damn well.
I watched earlier this year a Stuart Gordon movie, Dagon, a Lovecraft adaptation, and that was made I think 2 years after this, maybe three or four, sometime in like between 2000 and 2002, and it has similar like monster designs. I think like similar like amphibian tentacle monster because it's Lovecraft, and it does not look this good. Like
Right.
maybe it's because of the amount of it in that film. There's a lot more, but like
Yeah,
it's impressive how well it holds up here.
I
Just
think the only time it doesn't hold up is like less than half a second, like scuttling off the bleachers. That's it, and that's so shocking
mm,
for a 1998 CGI scene for me to say about a scene like that. I think it pulls off wonderfully. It could have been, and I think it was a nod to the Emmerich kind of films of the time.
yes,
It could have been
I
like,
can
and
see
those
that.
films did not. I don't think they were good to begin with, but they certainly the age has not helped those films at all.
It was
Um,
just the time. It's same thing with like a Resident Evil first one. Like
Yeah.
it's
I think it
it's
just
always
bears saying it
building
speaks to
up.
the capabilities of these directors. Definitely speaks to the capabilities of the creative team that Rodriguez assembled for sure. That we can see a scene like that and go, this scene is really cool. Stokely being pulled into a swimming pool by a tentacle leg is really well done. It's visceral. I can feel like I
Oh,
can feel
it
their teeth breaking
that's the one.
on the tile.
That was the one where I just thought like Jesus fuck, like I hate that. Because you can, yeah,
Yeah,
no, like you said, you can feel her teeth shattering on that.
you really can. It's so fucked. Oh God. Still love Josh Hartnett. I leave for 5 minutes, come back, and everyone's a fucking alien. You take this. So then you have to imagine Casey's just high out of his mind for the final 5 minutes of that movie.
And then he comes out of it a
He comes out of
genius.
it. And Josh Hartnett gets to not be taken over by a parasite. He just gets to be knocked out into some bleachers.
Oh yeah, he's the only one that doesn't get
Yeah.
possessed, isn't he? Or no, Casey starts to be, but it doesn't happen.
He has that Dewey come back at the end of the movie. Like he gets to come back all bloody and shit, going, "Did we get him?" Like he gets to be Dewey at the very end.
Yeah. That's
Oh
actually a
God,
really good description.
I love this movie. This movie fucking kills it. And Robert Patrick to me is actually pretty scary. In the beginning, there's this scene where you hear his fucking coach whistle, and then you look at a brief second, and it's him running like T2 style, like sprinting like Tom Cruise, full speed
It's it,
at the principal, just whistling, and it's fucking scary.
it's the run from that everyone made fun of from Get Out from the trailer when he's running
Right.
towards yeah, the like he's running directly towards the camera with like his hands up. It's so
And
good.
he's using the most like superficial, like tokenized part of his archetype. It's like these archetypes have been weaponized, and then they're all every tool is being utilized. It reminds me of a Stephen King book in a lot of different like in a couple different ways actually. It really does. Like
It definitely has that small town element.
yeah, and it has a like a losers club kind of vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean the fact that these kids get picked off one by one, and sometimes it's a bit difficult. Like I do love I going back to it. I love that scene where we realize Stan is turned. It's wild. It's incredible.
I think that's
Uh,
because I think watching it, you're more willing to accept that Delilah dies. Because
yeah,
again, right, you presume watching it that anyone that gets possessed is just they're dead, like they're not coming back from it because that's the way these movies are typically set up. It's something of an inversion for the genre for people to actually be able to recover from it. But so like you're kind of okay with Delilah dying because she's the most unlikable character. So then when it happens to Stan, you're like, shit, it could happen
yeah.
at like that's the first I feel like sad moment in the movie where someone like who you hoped would get out okay is just killed or not killed but taken over.
And then they drop like flies.
Yeah, it
it,
happened so quick from that point.
it really does because I think like King-esque style, we get to actually know these people for like an hour before the drug test, and a little over an hour before the drug test happens.
Yeah. Again, Salem's Lot spends like 400 pages showing people going to like
Hmm.
barbecues and shit, and then in the last 100 pages they all die. But this kind of does that.
Everyone does so well here. I mean, Delilah might not be, I love her character. I almost love her for being such a what was Elijah Wood's bullshit thing of
God, I don't remember.
you'd be a really cool person if you weren't such a class
A
A
grade A.
first grade bitch, a
That's
grade
what it
A
was.
bitch. To which Delilah responds
Are
perfectly,
you
"Are you
are
hitting
you
on me?"
fooling?
But Jordana Brewster did amazing, incredibly. I'm glad she got the role here. And all I know that she did after this was like Fast and Furious movie, so she's doing fine. But still,
Yeah.
um, very good cast, very good cast. Man, incredibly put together film. Yeah, I really adore this movie. And do you have anything else you'd like to talk about it?
Not that I can think of. I feel like we covered a lot. Granted, there's some carryover, but
Yeah, I mean, I think we went. I think we did this film justice because it is the kind of film that I think deserves justice. Because I think it's getting lost in the shuffle. Like people used to know this movie more than Urban Legend, like for instance. I
Yeah,
think it
like
should
I
be on the
said,
same kind of plateau, same kind of platform as Urban Legend. Of like it's
like
an
I said, I
essential
feel like
90s movie.
most of the people I know that are coming back to it are the people that are already like primarily interested in 90s, like people that love slashers from the 90s or movies like Final Destination and Urban Legend, Scream, stuff like that, just teen focused horror movies, like the people that are already part of that niche. And it hasn't really found, I feel like, a cult outside of that.
No, but it should be coming back. I don't know. Maybe it's like after Final Destination, films regained or films lost the self-awareness that the postmodern 90s gave to them, and they kind of
Well,
slasher
also
movies went the way.
9/11 happened, and
9/11 and
horror,
Columbine happened. I mean, I think
yeah, and
Columbine
then
did have a huge effect on these movies.
it's a very fine line. I was talking to someone recently about how clearly defined that era of horror was and how brief it was, because you feel
Yeah.
like it was way longer than it was, but no, within like 2 years, House of a Thousand Corpses comes out, and then you have Hostel, and just the entire landscape did a complete 180
Well, the
so
internet
quickly.
really changed that
Yeah,
too.
true.
I think like the torture porn movies, I think came from people getting on the internet and finding live leak videos of people getting beheaded overseas, and it was tapping into that kind of torture room kind of feeling.
It
Um,
was partly that and also partly a return, because it was again people like Eli Roth or Rob Zombie who grew up with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and so like it was now people returning to the things that they grew up watching,
yeah,
which is interesting. The way it comes back.
but I
Um,
also think that 99, like 99 saw Columbine and ostensibly like the death of the slasher film, at least where a pissed off white dude is killing his classmates and his girlfriend. We saw the death of that, but also we had Blair Witch Project that same year, so we saw a new
yes.
kind of horror come out in that same year. It's just what happens with horror, and this is probably my favorite chapter in the genre. I love movies like this. The Faculty is incredible. Um, so far as like if I had a ranking of Williamson, I think Scream is the best. I mean, it's kind of unnegotiable, but I think Scream, Dawson's Creek, and I Know What You Did Last Summer are really good. This is on the same level as a Scream 2 for me.
I can see
It's
that.
it's a very good movie. I think it's an essential movie that people should definitely pay more attention to, and not just as a relic of the 90s. It does have every staple of it. It might be one of the most 90s slasher movies ever, but that might just mean that it documented its time more accurately than the other ones did, or at least more potently or more viscerally. You know, because you're immediately transported to 1998 with The Offspring, as we talked about. Like you're immediately there. It's an immediate feeling, and that's part of the power of cinema, I guess. If I want to get all stupid with it, but that's part of the power of it. You know. Any closing remarks, Jacob?
Not that I can think of, other than it's guaranteed to jack you up.
That should have been the tagline for the movie. I'm really upset that it's "Take Me to Your Teacher." I'm upset that it's a bad pun. It should have been
Is that what it
"Guaranteed to
is?
Jack You Up." Yeah, take
What
me to
is
your
it?
teacher.
What does that even fucking mean?
Like take me to your leader, but take me to
Oh
your
my
teacher.
god, that's dumb. No, it
Yeah, yeah.
should have been
Guaranteed to
guaranteed to
jack you
jack
up.
you.
I mean, okay, I'm not even gonna get total Freud, but the idea of stabbing phallic instruments into everybody's eyeballs is pretty fucking crazy too. Um, I'm just put that out there as well. Literally, I fucking everyone death. But wow, I really picked the worst way to end this video. But
No,
that's
that's
also
the
there.
only way. That's the
I think
only
that's the
way.
only way. It really is. Thanks for watching this video. Faculty rules. And thanks for joining me, Jacob.
No problem.
All right. And that's it.
That's it. We did it. It didn't record. I'm
I,
kidding. It recorded. It recorded.
if it didn't record it.